This is a McMansion. This too. And so is this one. You've probably seen a version of one in an American suburb.
It's not a style of house. It can be Tudor one day, farmhouse the next day.
It's over 3,000 square feet. It's usually in the suburbs, and it's usually done in kind of a slapshot way. So a big house that maybe is, for lack of a better word, a little bit.
This house is so interesting. They have these individuals up here. Definitely Caesar on the right here. Looks like maybe some other folks, maybe like Galileo or somebody else over here. It's hard to see exactly from this shot. However, it's interesting. Almost some of these things around the windows almost look like it's plastic, almost like it's a set of some sort. It's so interesting as a house. I could only imagine driving by this or even living in this house. So it's very curious to me.
Tacky.
Despite their, at times, poor reputation, they've never really gone away.
These are the houses that I sell most often. I was just in a bidding war of this exact type of house.
And it's part of a larger trend. Home sizes in the US increased more than 20%.
So this house they have in the background here, that seems like a pretty nice looking house to me. I think that other one was particularly ridiculous, but for anybody who isn't in the US who's watching this, it's not like there's houses every block that are just ginormous and have like ridiculous statues at the top of them. That is a particularly rare occurrence. This one they have here in the background, this I could see, especially when you're out in the suburbs somewhere and there's just a lot of land, and maybe this house has this giant home on this plot of land, but then there's maybe a similar sized plot of land next door, but then they have a normal sized house on it and they just have very large yard in all directions. This does happen. You do see this. Sometimes you can see a few of these in a row, but statues, very rare. That's certainly not common. I think this is certainly a much nicer looking home than that other one, so I'm not really sure why they are including ugly as part of this category at this point in time, but certainly there are noticeably large houses in the suburbs in America that are disproportionately large compared to like some of their neighbors.
Between 1993 and 2023, while household sizes have decreased.
The McMansion didn't really go away. It's just that we started viewing housing in a different way.
People are making money on McMansions, but are they making as much money as they could have made on a different type of home for the same price point? And that's sort of a different question.
So how did McMansions become so popular? And if they are considered a bad investment, why do Americans keep buying them?
That's a good question. I didn't realize that these were so popular. They clearly exist. I think especially from where I'm from, in areas that have like good school systems or things like that, or maybe prestigious areas, you notice especially large homes in those areas. Like sometimes they'll have a house and it'll be a family of like two plus a small child, and they'll have thousands of square feet, and like they have so many rooms that like you would never be able to fit in them all, and like you could probably be in one room on the other side of the house and like yell out, and probably the person on the opposite end of the house might not even be able to hear you. Like they're just obscenely large for the size of family, but it almost seems like a prestige thing of like, oh, if you're in this area you must be rich and you must show off or whatever it is. These do exist in some of the other areas as well, but they're certainly less prominent, I would say. Usually they're much more clustered. Like it's very rare to have just a single one of these in a particular area. Usually like it and maybe the neighbor on either side will have it, and like maybe there'll be another couple streets where there's a few of these, but in some areas where it's supposed to be like a rich area or a particularly good school system, for instance, maybe like every house will basically look like this.
McMansions first appeared in American suburbs in the 1980s. Middle-class families wanted bigger homes, and McMansions were the answer, a slice of the American dream. So they were produced en masse, and cheaply. A couple of factors played a big part in their rise. The first was the deregulation of the mortgage industry. New laws passed in the 80s that allowed banks to make some risky financial moves, like allowing adjustable rate mortgages or mortgages with interest rates that are variable, shifting the risk from the lender to the borrower. Borrowers who couldn't qualify for the traditional mortgages were able to get ARMs.
The adjustable rate mortgage really changed how people viewed home buying in America. And in fact, there was a lot of pushback against the adjustable rate mortgage because people thought it was a scam.
It was also a time when wages were growing rapidly, and the inequality gap was widening. Big homes were a way for people to show off.
Because if you're seeing, I can have a 4,500 square foot home with, 5% down, and I can get this mortgage that I'm not really qualified for, and people jump on that.
In doing a simple Google search, you'll find many different types of McMansions. One common theme beyond size is often the number of amenities: a gym, a bar, a large entertainment room, a basement. The list goes on.
That amenity-driven plan, that is a specific type of plan. That is what the McMansion really is. There's just so much space, and it's hard to integrate it under one roof.
And many were built with cheap materials, like new lumber or mass-produced stucco, fake stone veneer, or vinyl siding. Also a result of the new technological developments in building in the 20th century. In 2007, the median price of a McMansion was about $520,000. They accounted for 15% of all suburban homes at that time.
They seemed like a really good investment. You're like, great, I can have this big house and I can afford it, and I'll be able to resell it for more than I paid for it. And to a large extent, that is true.
So it's interesting that they sort of referenced that they weren't made out of particularly good materials. I'm not sure if I've ever heard that before, but also I don't know a lot of people who have McMansions to say one way or the other. I do think this is generally something people reference for newer constructed homes because there's different ways to add stability to a home other than just having the highest quality, like lumber, for instance. You can have cheaper materials, but with better joints, for instance, and that could be sturdier than something with better quality materials, but sort of lower quality architecture and assembly. And so I think this is something that everybody is getting away with right now for any newer homes. I feel like this isn't something specific to McMansions, though they are referencing this as though that were the case. I don't think I've heard or seen any data that would prove that is true, but likely part of that trend where America is not that old of a country, broadly speaking, but in a lot of the areas that are very well populated, there are older homes, and so I would suspect that these are in comparison to those older homes with potentially sturdier materialing and architecture.
The American financial system is rocked to its foundation as top Wall Street institutions topple under a mountain of debt.
The abundance of subprime mortgages and low interest rates came to a screeching halt in September 2007. As interest rates rose, many borrowers couldn't afford their higher monthly payments, and therefore defaulted on their loans. In some cases, homeowners owed more than their homes were worth, which led to widespread foreclosures and a bankruptcy crisis.
Until home prices stop falling, things just aren't going to get any better.
Home building activity declined sharply, creating a significant gap between supply and demand that led to a housing shortage. McMansions gained a reputation for being a bad investment.
This house looks like it was designed by someone who maybe saw a house once in their life, but either had some sort of visual issues or was wearing kaleidoscope glasses that you get during Halloween.
And instead of buying McMansions, Americans downsized or got into home improvement.
They wanted to conserve on gas bills, water bills, air conditioning, all of their utilities. They felt like they only needed maybe a smaller home, a ranch, something practical. That was a very, very short-lived notion.
Buyers eventually came around. According to Realtor.com, McMansions represented up to a quarter of all home sales in the years leading up to the pandemic.
Wow, that's quite a bit. I think they had referenced earlier, I believe it was in the 80s, they said it was about 15% of the market, so obviously that's a noticeable uptick.
The trend accelerated in the years since. Yet it's become harder to afford a home than ever before. Mortgage rates in 2025 will likely remain high, while home prices have skyrocketed. Construction costs have inflated too. Building a home is incredibly pricey. Prices are expected to rise even more, with potential tariffs imposed by the Trump administration.
So this is something that I believe I'm following their argument, but also if we take a step back and we think about the real estate market as any other type of market, from my understanding, I think one of the big reasons why developers aim for these larger homes in building these larger homes is because you're targeting a audience who naturally has more money. And so this is where in any other area, you are potentially looking, again, I think I might have said this in some of my previous videos, but generally speaking in the market, you're looking for either undercutting the competition by having a low price and a high quantity, something like a Walmart, or you're trying to have a lower quantity but higher quality, so to speak, or higher price tag associated with it. And so for homes, one of the things they can do is amenities, larger footprint, etc. And so this means that developers are just finding it more monetarily incentivizing to build large homes so that way the wealthy people come and buy their new latest home. Again, just because I would expect a individual like the average American, they're not going to go buy a house every so often or even these large homes that exist. They're probably going to buy some of the inventory that already exists out there that's a little bit smaller, a little bit more manageable. And that's even for the Americans who can't afford to buy a home at all. And so if you're looking for somebody who potentially is wantonly wanting to throw around money, especially for prestige or showing off, that's exactly your audience. Why would you, as somebody who could make a product, make something that's much smaller and cheaper and more affordable for the average consumer who is likely not going to consume that much? They're going to try to potentially buy that one item and maybe never again, and they're going to want to have the best deal on it. And that's going to be much harder to make a profit off of than if you just make one product that's slightly larger, but you can charge 2, 3, 4, 5 times the price for, because you're selling it to somebody who just doesn't care. They're just going to throw money at it for the premise of showing off and showing that they have this money. And so from a purely business standpoint, I understand why it exists, and I think that this is some of the trend that is currently occurring. And so I still think it is better to have more houses out in the market than not. So I'm glad that new houses are being made, but I believe this is a trend that we are seeing where developers are building these larger homes, and I think it's for exactly that reason, which is they can sell it for a lot more. They get a lot more profit in their pocket. It allows them to keep doing their business and keep making more with potentially less effort than they would if they needed to make 3 or 4 houses or 5 houses to make up for the same margin that they would on one of these large houses.
And that's helped McMansions.
They are becoming the choice of first-time home buyers who don't want a 1960s split level, but can't maybe go into the price bracket of a new construction home.
McMansions have in fact appreciated at nearly the same rate as regular homes when looking at Zillow data. Though it's important to note that Zillow doesn't break out a McMansion from other 5-bedroom homes. The McMansion premium, or the extra money buyers are willing to pay for a larger, amenity-filled home versus another one, has fallen.
That makes sense. I would also assume that this market has to be getting saturated at this point, because again, I think I've heard about this trend happening for a number of years, certainly likely during the 2021 to 2025, maybe even earlier time frame. And so again, if you're going to be able to have a premium, if somebody's willing to pay 71.5% extra for a house than what it would normally cost for the square footage or whatever else is there, you're going to sell that product. If you could sell lemonade to somebody for nearly double the price because of the location that you're in, like let's say you go to Los Angeles or something and you're selling it to celebrities and they need to be able to show off that they have a lot of money, so you can charge them $2 for a glass of lemonade instead of $1 in like the middle of suburban America, you're going to do that. There's no reason why you wouldn't from a purely business standpoint. But again, this seems like it potentially is related to market saturation, or also in 2025, inflation has been pretty serious, as well as the fact that interest rates are so much higher now than in 2021. And so there's a chance that due to the interest rates being so high, people can't just afford to pay so much extra for a home because that'll be added on top of their interest rate, making it even less affordable for them. So it could be either of those things. Those are at least what comes to my mind. I don't know if they're going to elaborate on or if they're just going to highlight this data.
If you are stuck in the middle of the city with a large family and you're just out of space and looking for a larger home, but maybe the stuff near you isn't as affordable and the stuff that's big enough that's being built right now isn't affordable, then this is a good opportunity for you.
McMansions are less than 20% of all home sales. In Bergen County, New Jersey, one of the most sought-after real estate markets outside the New York City metro, Rubenstein says McMansions are as popular as any other house.
Even these houses are getting multiple offers. I bid myself for a client $100,000 over ask, and there were many offers above.
Experts say their investment value is determined on a case-by-case basis. McMansions located near cities appreciate better than ones further out in the suburbs. The desirability of the zip code matters too, of course.
If they're really far out from the city and really just like in a completely amenity poor area, then yeah, they sit on the market forever because no one wants to drive 20 minutes to go to the grocery store.
I really don't think it's about the house itself. I really think it's about, the location, buying in a place that people are going to want to buy in 5 or 10 years.
It also hinges on the construction.
Some of these large homes with large yards that need maintenance, with maybe lower quality building materials that need to be replaced, can have a higher cost of ownership than something that was built a little more sturdy and built to last.
Some McMansions do take a price cut, as the more unique amenities like a fake river in a living room or a movie theater aren't for everyone. And any home older than 20 years will likely need repairs. Yet it will be especially crucial in 2025 to evaluate just how much maintenance a home will need. New tariffs on steel and aluminum, a volatile economy, and crackdowns on immigration are expected to make construction even more pricey. If there's a lot to fix, a McMansion would be a terrible investment, even if the price per square foot is relatively low in comparison.
Buying a home is seldom a bad investment. And even when it is kind of a tacky suburban McMansion, what we're seeing across the market at all price tiers and size tiers is an increase in price reductions right now. So for buyers, if you're looking to get into a bigger home, these McMansions might be a good option.
I think the only ones that have not held their value as well are the ones that look like you walk in and you're like, okay, it's 1995. So people don't want to be transported back in time. They want something that's been maintained. People want a new construction house.
That was an interesting segment. I certainly learned a lot about McMansions today. If you've enjoyed what you've seen, please hit like or subscribe. I'll see you around.